assessment basically of the outlook for 2024. Now, just a little bit of a backstory. The United Nations is saying that Nigeria's rising debt, inflation rates which continue to increase, and an impact on the welfare of the citizens put the nation at risk of declining economic growth in 2024. Now, this was made known in the World Economic Situation and Prospects Report for 2024, and you can catch or find this report in the Punch newspaper. We have a special guest joining us this morning to try to break it down, what this really means, what the projections are, and where we go from here.
And this is where we make welcome Dr. Deji West, consultant, chairman, healthcare company, a whole lot we can talk about you. Like off before we came on, I had referred to you as the proverbial elephant that the blind men were brought to come feel and say what it is they were feeling at that time. But good morning and welcome.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. West. Looking at this report, the question would certainly come to the minds of Nigerians. What are the indicators really in depth that have led to this conclusion or this projection for the economy?
I think there are two sides to the coin. The first thing that we have to look at is what is happening in reality. In reality, we can see that there are many challenges. High inflation. I think inflation is, as defined by the government, is 28.22, but for the man out there, it's probably 35 to 40. Inflation is actually quite high, so um, your purchasing power is just not there. Every time you go out to buy something, like the next day the price has gone up. And if you look at the impact of foreign exchange, it's particularly the rate on your purchasing power, it's also quite impossible. So let me give you an example. You import something into the country at a certain rate, so you expect to be able to buy, but, the, but you can't sell at a higher price because unfortunately nobody's going to buy your product. So it's quite tough. We also have persistent poverty in our environment. That doesn't help, and whatever growth there is very sluggish. So the challenges remain. There is hope, but there's a bit of a trough we have to go through before we can start riding the crest into the positive side.
Hmm.
That's what I'll say.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. West. Now, looking at how we've found ourselves at this point, what could have been done differently to avoid where we are, and what lessons can we learn going forward?
I think if you look at it from the point of view of the previous government, they used to, particularly economically, and the sort of rules and new um, guidelines that came out from the central bank, they were like immediate. From today you can no longer do this. From tomorrow you can no longer do this. You don't treat an economy of 200 million people like that. Everything has to be transitional. There should be like a gap, 6 months. In the next 6 months, this is what we're going to do. In the next 3 months, this is what we're going to do. So you give people the time to prepare. You give businesses the time to adjust, and so on and so forth. But you don't just bring our rules out of whim. It's not how to reduce the economy anyway. That's my take on it.
Still staying on that focus, which is the way the economy has been handled in the last 1 year. You are delving already into macroeconomic issues, and so since you touched on inflation already, and so let's begin to look at how the macroeconomic policies of the last administration is still having a hangover effect on this present administration. Let's look at the Naira redesign policy, how it has contributed to some of these projections we're seeing in this report right now.
So if you look at the Naira redesign, um, first we've redesigned the Naira, we've put the new currency in place, and taken the old currency out, and meant to be an exchange, but in effect we've had to come back and we're using both. And it appears as if all that money is still in the same economy. So we've printed money. When you print money, the direct impact of printing money is inflation. And that's every economic book will tell you that. So it's contributed to um, it's contributed to inflation without a shadow of a doubt. But I think, running two currencies is a bit shameful, honestly, to put it mildly. We need to be a bit more decisive with it. But I can imagine that the guys that took over at the central bank, whatever the net there is probably a bit more than they expected. And that's why you can see that everything coming out of the central bank at the moment is almost nothing. It's just they're quiet. They must be really working hard to try to stabilize things. They can't even buy their way out of the exchange rate. The devaluation of the naira is continuous. They can't do it. It must be a real struggle. They have to come up with some serious, innovative ways to try to just keep that tide from continuing in that direction.
We also see in this report, this latest report, where again the country is being warned about its rising debt profile. So most often it's always, this is not the first time the World Bank, IMF will talk about Nigeria's rising debt profile, and even the Debt Management Office would also at intervals also mention this. But people we've talked to in terms of economists will tell you, well, it's not as if debt is a bad thing. You've got the background in this. So is debt really a bad thing? And link that up to countries in the world who we see as first world nations, the US, China. Are they in debt? And so why are they not in the same quagmire that we're in?
Okay, thank you for that question. It's quite interesting. Let's take it step by step. First, let's deal with the United States. The United States is a unique country, a very clever country. Ever since they created the petrodollar, which was in the 70s, America can have as much debt as it has, as it can have. It does not need to repay. That's the first thing. America does not repay debt, so it just prints money. It's a very unique case. So it's not one that yeah, debt is good, but debt has to be managed and debt has to be limited. There's an extent to which you should have debt, and every country should be able to know what the limiting factor is. In Nigeria, it's very strange because most of the revenue earned, which obviously comes from oil, goes towards paying back debt. So our barrels are kind of like sold off into the future, and that's not very good for us. We need to do something about that, and I understand as a country we keep on borrowing. If you're going to borrow for assets, don't borrow for recurrent expenditure, and that's another side of the coin. We're not using that money to make money.
All right, well, we're speaking with Dr. Deji West. If you've got a question or a comment, this is the time to get in touch. Telephone number is 01-448-9981. And you can also send the messages through via WhatsApp 0809 440 Now, speaking about the high inflation rates, this seems to be something that other countries apart from Nigeria are experiencing as well. Why are these countries having the same issues at the same time?
Well, I mean, inflation is there's a mixed bag of reasons why people have inflation. So you can, even if you think about the wars that are going on in the war, if you think about what's happening in Ukraine, which is because Russia and Ukraine are countries that give a lot to the war, gas, agriculture, things of that nature, and that's not happening at the moment. There are all kinds of sanctions that are flown around, and these have a direct impact on what I would call the developing countries as opposed to just the Western countries. That everybody, once they sneeze, we all catch a cold. Is pretty much the situation. Now that's a direct impact, particularly to African countries. But we need to find a way to solve our own problems. And that's I'm an advocate that we should find innovative ways to solve our own problems.
And when it comes to the currencies, a lot of the countries in Africa have their currencies depreciating, but the CFA, for some reason, doesn't seem to have that issue. Can you explain why?
The who?
The CFA, the CFA.
Oh, but the CFA French currency, and they are the ones that manage. Although the individual countries have their own central banks, but the CFA is managed by France directly. So I think there's a slight difference. You can't compare it to countries where the currency is marked against the dollar.
Right.
It's just they're completely different.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Okay, in the timing, let's also still image of the country, the debt to GDP ratio, and let's look at it, how sustainable it will be for us, and also talk us through because we're now also linking up to other countries, for example, how they're going through the same thing. Are we ever working in that direction of defaulting when creditors come calling, like we saw countries, people in Greece and other places?
Well, I know Ghana recently kind of had a situation where they went bankrupt and then they had a bailout by the IMF. Um, I don't know what the story for Nigeria is. Nigeria is very complicated. It doesn't obey any typical economic rules. Nigeria is unique. In Nigeria, for instance, if you look at the gas prices, every producer of gas in Nigeria wants to be paid at the market rate. So there's no domestic policy that can keep people paying less for the gas they use for power. So I would say that Nigeria is different from the norm. I don't know if we're going to get to the point where we default, but if I was the Minister of Petroleum, I'd be interested in getting the production as high as possible going out of Nigeria. It's a fight. You can't allow your country to go down. It's a mixed effort. Everybody has to get together. We just have to do innovative things. We can't do the norm and expect to continue like this. It would be a failed state otherwise.
All right, if you just joined in, it's Lagos Talks 981, and we're having Dr. Deji West helping us get a better insight into the latest report released by the United Nations, and that's relating to Nigeria's economic outlook in 2024, assessing growth and development, bring it back home to Nigeria, and that's what the focus is. We'd like to get your thoughts when we return on the other side on 0809 or read the messages on WhatsApp, and then get your calls to come in on 014489981. You touched on oil, but on the other side, we'll see if it's crude oil, groundnut oil, or even palm oil after now.
What do you want? Something. I'll search for something with money.
Is my voice coming out okay?
Yes, it is.
Your questions are like exam questions.
Oh wow!
Giving me a
You had
I'm just
the kind of background you have is we need to get as much
Because
knowledge.
we're learning.
See how you dropped. Look at that petrodollar question.
Yeah.
That's so. I mean, if we need
So
to.
the problem is Nigeria's economy is nasty.
Okay.
It's nasty. There's just no way to put it together.
Okay.
There's no way to put it together. There's no.
Not all. Okay, it's still in breakfast category.
So what do you want?
Move it to all audio. Like no, the category by the there. No. There. Okay, let me do it. Let me come over.
Okay.
It's on breakfast here. So now.
Is that food?
Sorry?
Is that food?
I know. I must put a stop breaker so we can.
Providence Bank. Future forward bank.
Let's do one of the liners and then we'll get the music.
Oh yes, the Province Bank is one of your backers.
Yes, for this show, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bank is life, and life is music.
Okay, so
Here on Smooth
What do you want?
the song.
Where is it?
There, money.
Go back
Let's search for the song.
and touch that back.
Okay, let's go on. It's too late.
Let's go. We're Smooth 98.1 FM. It's still Lagos Talks 981, and the conversation is still heading in the direction of Nigeria's economic outlook for 2024. It's still January, and so year resolution, personal level, national level, that's all coming, assessing government growth and development. So you talked about the issues relating to oil and how it affects Nigeria's economy. So this is where the question now comes in. Now, a new administration is in place, and of course, the last time we had would always be the question of where where we are coming from, and now this is from the same party. Transition of power from one party, the same party to the other, from Buhari to President Tinubu at this moment. So let's even look at the first few policies that the president reeled out until this moment. First, let's look at the policy of the subsidy removal, because I'm raising this question. You talked about how, let's look at the price of petrol. it doesn't even obey economic policies. If you say subsidies are being removed, and yet we're being warned that we're fleecing away lots of money that could go into other developmental areas as a result of subsidies, and yet we see this. So, in effect, subsidy removal by this government a reality or a myth or an intention?
It was intentional, I believe. I just don't agree with the way it was done. Everybody said whether you like it or not, it has to go. Yes, I agree that it has to go, but I think it should have been transitional. I just you don't you shouldn't shock an economy like the way it was done. That's my take on it.
So, by how much would you say, in terms of inflation, as that, in addition to what impact we had the narrow design policy of the previous administration on Nigerians in terms of inflation, how much did that subsidy removal trigger inflation?
Oh, it spiked it without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, transport fares. Everybody started asking for a salary raise. Nigeria is a very strange place. The contract you have with your employer is 1 year. So 1 year, you sit with the same salary, and then the next year you get an increase. But inflation is going up, and so inflation goes up say by 30%, and then when it comes to the end of the year, you get a salary increase of 10, 15%. It doesn't add up. Yeah. So it's too shocking, in my opinion, for our economy to have removed the subsidy at once. I think we should have done it. It should have been done over a 6 month period. Just give businesses a chance to adjust. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you look at the Nigerian economy, Nigeria's economy is held up by small businesses. At least 60% of GDP or more. Small businesses is what's holding up this country without a shadow of a doubt. And they're the ones that are taking the heat all the time. They keep getting hit, punched in the face, and kicked down. And then for businesses that are resilient in Nigeria, you have to really, just bow to them, to say well done, take off your hat to them and say kudos, because we don't even operate in sort of like an enabling environment. Everybody is fighting to survive, and everybody is doing different things to survive. And if you go to other climes, it's just as if the government is backing their businesses to do well and all that. Today somebody will walk in and say, "I'm from Lagos State advertising," because you have your name on your wall. You have to pay for that, and all kinds of spurious taxes come from here and there, and they still have to pay salaries, and they still have to survive. Kudos to Nigerian small businesses, although they're shutting in their numbers at the moment. Over 100 businesses are shutting every day.
This links me to taxation, and because the government itself also talked about taxing and increasing tax net to get in people to pay more. So let's look at how much taxation in itself, aside from the revenue in terms of subsidy now, how taxation policies of Nigerian government has stifled businesses, small and medium.
Thank you for that question. I'm an advocate for tax, but tax with common sense. If you're in a recession, or if you're in an economy that's sluggish, and you add taxes, then you're not going to kick out of it. It's not possible. I even think that at the moment the government should come up with it. That's why I said it's innovation and creativity that's going to get Nigeria out of the mess it is in right now. I heard that they were trying to stimulate the economy and they were giving out palliatives, and I just simply don't agree with that. I think they should have looked for ways to different ways to get people into employment. Tell small businesses, if you employ 5 people, only pay taxes on 2 people, and or 2 persons make a plan. Or if you employ 10 people, then you have a concession, not to just stimulate the economy, get things going, and look for different ways to there are so many gaps in our economy. For instance, Nigeria has great waterways, but we don't even have a maritime bank. There's so many things that can be done to boost the economy, to get people back to work, and to generate money to the Nigeria's economy. I'm not sure what it is, maybe about 600 billion or something like that annually. We just need to do things that can boost the size of the economy, so you can bring people back to the workforce and put food on people's tables. That's my take. I think businesses are overtaxed, especially from the various taxes that you have to pay. I was just speaking the other day with some of the guys in my office, and we were talking about different types of taxes. You know, all the levies, all the things that you pay for your car, all the permits, all the things that you have to do, and then all the various things that you have to pay when you run a business. And if you have a truck, if you drive out of Lagos, all the various taxes. And that's just one thing. And then you have the black tax. I'm not sure if you've heard of the black tax. The black tax is the one where somebody sends you a message, oh, I can't send my son to school, or they send you a message, I'm in the hospital, and then the black tax is a heavy burden, and people have to say no and pray that they survive. It's a very interesting environment we live in.
All right, now let's go on to WhatsApp. This message is coming from Mr. Dews, and he says it's funny how propaganda has taken the better of Nigeria. The economy is very easy for even for a good secondary school economics teacher to understand. There's no magic anywhere with numbers. 1 plus 1 would always be equal to 2. The government plays dumb and they pad it up with propaganda, and here we are. Kudos to your guests for speaking in black and white. Now, you did say earlier about the importance of the small businesses in Nigeria. They're not getting a lot of support. A lot of them are shutting down. Are there any strategies that they can actually adopt to sort of stay afloat with the current situation?
So I run a boutique consulting company, and one of the things that we've done is that we're transitioning from your normal 9 to 5 type of business to what we call an agile framework. So the first thing I did with the in 2022, the price of diesel quadrupled, and as you know, diesel is a major cost for businesses, and with the advent of the petrol price also escalating, obviously transport fares have gone up as well. So the employee is suffering coming to work. I'm suffering buying diesel all the time. So we took Friday off, and so people work from home on Friday, and we are thinking of increasing that. So as as you go to an agile network, so your primary cost now becomes data cost as opposed to the transport cost. But you have to also ensure that you can get your employees into that sort of rhythm of saying, I'm working and I'm producing or I'm generating substance so that the business can have a continuum. So it's not very easy to transition. People who come from the project management side have an easier way of transitioning to that, because with an agile type of methodology, you have to meet every day, you have to put your targets on the table, and you have to determine when your results are coming through. It's but that's just a creative way of doing things. Instead of having to pay diesel for a few people working in the building, and pretty much it's for me, diesel is burning cash. No other way to put it.
So this leads us to the next phase of, there are certain agreements like the African Free Trade Agreement, which is in existence, and one would wonder if we've got smaller neighboring countries already reaping benefits out of it. What's stopping Nigeria from, diving into it and also getting its own fair share of the opportunities in this agreement? What are we afraid of?
So I think Nigeria is probably just late to the table in terms of, if you think about it, we're the biggest economy in Africa. I was recently in Ghana, and whilst in Ghana, we're just talking about some international business, and they realized that they did not have the ability to pay. But a lot of Ghanaians were coming to Nigeria to buy stuff. So people, they still depend on us. They depend on us for oil, for instance. And they were coming to buy goods and things from Nigeria, and they were going to pay, with gold. For example, Ghana has a domestic gold scheme that they use to, and they were going to try to do a Naira CD swap with that. But I think in terms of the agreement, I think Nigeria is just late to the table. I think they need to be there, and they have to be the ones that are leading the company. But we have our homework to do. It's tough for our country at the moment.
Yes, this business trust are issues, and this resonates the theme of the World Economic Forum just concluded at Davos, where the theme rebuilding trust in businesses all over again. I'd like you to help us speak to this theme and link it to how we can use this to revive businesses in the country and also go on to be global players.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is if we have a policy to enable businesses in Nigeria, I think that's a starting point. Um, and there's so many ways in which we can do this. You have to give the Nigerian small businessman, small businesswoman, kudos for what they have done thus far. But we just have to be able to play on a level playing field with other countries. Business has to trust government to back it, to be to enable the business. And we can't even serve ourselves before you want to serve in a global market. Let me give you an example of where small businesses backed by government. In my activities, I've been able to meet quite a few Chinese people operating in Nigeria. In fact, Nigeria is a haven for Chinese people. The biggest number of foreigners in Nigeria are Chinese. And what happens is that the Chinese person comes and says to you, you're looking at this guy wearing a T-shirt and saying, "Oh, I'm from the Bank of China." So what do you mean you're from the Bank of China? You're just an ordinary person, and he gives you his business card and he has the Bank of China behind it. But what tends to happen is that they come here because they have the backing of their government that they must succeed, and they say big things, and you're like, how's the small person saying all these big things? And that's because there's trust that whatever happens, if this business comes through, I'll be backed by the government. And they have certain criteria that they have to meet. They meet that criteria, and the government comes through for them. So it's that sort of thing. We need to enable our businesses in a similar fashion.
It is still Lagos Talks 981. The conversation is still moving around the recent report released by the United Nations, and that's all about Nigeria's economic outlook in 2024, assessing growth and development. Our guest Deji West is still here, so we still got more questions for him. But then after now, we expect the calls now to come in on 014489981, or you can send us a message like Dewey's sent earlier on 0809 4440981 with Smooth 98.1 FM.
Go the smooth breakfast way.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with the African Twin Agreement. So I had to just wing it.
Banking mean to you? Speed,
What
innovation, convenience, lifestyle goals, or
you
just
did a Michael Phelps well. You didn't drown.
No. So
You
basically,
did it Phelps.
what happens is that if you've done professional exams before,
Yes.
to take care of your daily
no good
experience.
you also are not going to do it.
Oh, so I found that I did my accounts when I passed first time. I learned because there's a whole session of learning how to write professional exams. And through that, I learned that when you go with the question, rewrite the answer. That's as you are rewriting that answer, you find out what the examiner is trying to test. And you to give some meat. Don't just go away with I said, no go green.
So we'll let you breathe a while.
So why are you going international? What is local?
You will come in there.
Okay.
When you walk,
Because
it is like watching a G clef stroll across an octave accented by a C sharp. When you talk, the cadence of your voice is a tenor saxophone, making love to the cello at a perfect pitch. You are so smooth. That's why we keep it here on 98.1. This is just me signing out.
We need to decisively stop insurgents. Take out half of your army, put them on the road. Stop banditry, If they're not doing anything, kidnapping the country, what people have to eat. You have to just do something. 4 million are coming into employment every year. Available jobs, only 1 million. These are the issues. these are things that we need to discuss. That's the way Nigeria is. Innovation, creativity. We need to stop speaking to the old. The youngsters are doing a great job in fintech. All that. We need to expand that. I don't think any international is going to help Nigeria. Minister of Petroleum looking crazy for the next part of how do I add? Which company is coming on board? The central bank governor said to his personal friend, if he knew that what he was going to see was what he saw, he would never have taken the job. I'm not saying that he spoke to somebody. I know the friend he spoke to. Hmm? I'm not going to say it.
It's going to be very
One gist.
No, because sometimes people don't really realize the enormity of the situation until they walk in and then it's like that.
There's something called a negative balance sheet. I've had it for years. The central bank is negative. It runs a negative balance sheet. It's a lot of money that sucked all that money out. So when they got into government, that's what it's become now.
That they're holding on to, you know, who's fighting.
Urban mentality is that they own everything and we're the slaves. Visionless. So we put a good man, central bank, government, looking for foundation to stand on.
Exactly, because you can have one good man, right? Because there's already rooted and everything is
This is the help that you get. You found somebody who's very close to one of the ministers. You want to try to help them digitize the entire healthcare system, like build half of it. And she's supposed to take us to the so I have to have a meeting so I said, this is what I need.
wow. After this one, yeah, we'll come. Yeah. On in 20 seconds. Loco. Yeah. It's Smooth 98.1. This is Lagos Talks Omas and Zibby. We've got our special guest with us, Dr. Deji West. He's a business consultant. It's a long resume, and I believe at the end of the program, we'll delve into a bit more of that. We're speaking about the economic outlook for Nigeria. Now, this report from the UN basically talks about how 2024 is going to look. Now, they're saying that economic growth in Nigeria may decline. This report is produced by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and it's developed in partnership with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and 5 UN regional commissions. Dr. Deji West, yes, it does seem like there are a lot of issues and challenges. Are there any sectors in Nigeria that have, or at the moment, seem to have a lot of potential?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. If you look at, for instance, what probably the younger sector, fintech particularly, there's quite a lot going on in fintech and then in other industries as they begin to digitize those industries. For instance, I have my business. One of my businesses, the primary thing I'm doing at the moment is in the health tech a space where we're building solutions for healthcare stakeholders. There's quite a bit in terms of opportunities over there. And we're making good strides, particularly in fintech. Fintech is one of the easiest ways to help bring the unbanked into the general economy. So yes, there's quite a bit going on. amongst the youth, I would say. But I also say, in terms of agriculture, people are bringing in solar power to irrigate farms. That's taking on a new stride. And then also there's also the issue of in farming under non-climatic conditions. So you set the temperature, you build these huge barns, and there are people who are already doing that, although at a small scale. But this means that you can produce the same crop, all year round. So there's quite a bit that's going on that should be that should help our country going forward. It's just like we have to go back to the same issue that needs to be backed up. One of the challenges with farming, as you know, is banditry and all the herdsmen and all that stuff. But,
That takes us to the place of security in order to boost agricultural production, which we touched on. So help us explain how just tackling security or the insecurity challenge in Nigeria can just be the silver bullet.
I'm not an expert, obviously, in security, but I just think that if you want to do something to change, you have to do something you haven't done before. Um, if you have bandits who are carrying guns and rifles, etc., and I've seen videos with all this huge, incredible artillery, you could stop it once and for all. We need to deploy the army, unless Nigeria hasn't got an army. If the police can't do it, which if you look at the sophistication of the sort of like weaponry that the bandits have, you really need to just bring out the army, make it a state of emergency, give them make it defined, so time period, time bound, and tell them to take care of it. That's one. How can insurgents rule how you eat, your family, community? That's what comes to your table. You have to deal with it once and for all. That's if I was on leadership, that would be my take. Just do it, and you give the army a time period to do it, and you bring incredible confidence back to the farmers or the agricultural sector.
In terms of growing the real sector of the economy, what about there's this policy in there already, the ease of doing business. How effective has this been in terms of boosting the confidence of people? How easy is it for one to wake up, raise capital, and be able to set up a small scale business in Nigeria? You're a business person, so you should be able to speak in that regard.
I think it was a blip. I think it worked for a very short period of time, but I think we're back to status quo. I think things are still very difficult to do. I had an assignment to work for some Italians who are setting up some without disclosing too much, but even just to open an association type of business, that took 8 months. 8 months. 8 months, yes.
In 8 months, you can imagine what's the turnover of a business can look like in 8 months, and it's yet to take off.
Oh, they gave up eventually and went away, and they were going to bring millions of dollars of business to Nigeria. So they gave up because they said, "Oh, we have to take it to the Ministry of Justice. They have to sign something. Oh, we have to send it to the embassy. They have to sign something of no objection. Oh, it has to go to the Ministry of I think it was Finance as well." And it went on, and they were playing me like that, and they gave up and said they were not doing it anymore. And this is after they had done the rounds. They had come to Nigeria many times. They visited different areas where they were going to open factories, and it's a very sad situation.
So oil becomes a major source of Nigeria's mainstay, as in your earlier opening submission it would look like. But over the years, there's been this talk of stolen crude and not being able to account for every drop of crude that the country produces. How can the country mop this up? Because we're talking about the country needs the dollar very, very much.
Okay, so you have to don't call it crude, call it crude oil.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's just being a purist.
Yes, go ahead.
Our oil and gas industry is providing sustenance to the country, but obviously a great percentage, I think about 93% of that, of that is being used to pay back debts. So I think the role of the Minister of Petroleum, amongst other things, is to get production up, production. Means also to monitor oil prices. As oil prices go up, it's a bumper time for us, and so it's. But I think, as a Minister of Petroleum, I think Nigeria probably has too much in terms of crude oil resources under the ground that should be above the ground, and that would be an area where try and get production up to 2 million barrels, 2.5 million barrels, 3 million. But that's where we should go in terms of if that's how we're going to survive in terms of getting us out of debt on the one hand and providing for the country, then yes. In the oil sector, on the upstream side, I would say that's the way forward.
All right, let's go on to WhatsApp to look at the messages coming through. Dakbo from Ilukweju says, kudos to you, the guest, who happens to be making a lot of comprehensive analysis. Borrowing money for recurrent expenditure rather than assets is economically backward. It's a big pity that the last administration laid the foundation of our current quagmire and predicament. Sudden removal of subsidy didn't assist matters. The obvious solution, which can cushion this high inflation indices, is automatically generating products each time consumption is enacted. Looking to the IMF and World Bank to provide our internal answers is like physically chasing an antelope in the forest. And let's go on to the phone lines. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Moses. Very well, thank you.
Good morning.
President budget proposal. It has not worked.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moses, for sharing your thoughts. Dr. Deji?
Thank you very much for that contribution. I'm completely in agreement. Most organizations, most countries have agendas. I remember the Yaradua administration said they had a 7-point agenda, and then in this one, 8-point agenda, and it just doesn't make sense. In fact, I'm actually an advocate for a 1-point agenda, and that's power. Solve power. You'll solve leadership, you'll solve education, you'll solve healthcare, you'll solve agriculture. Solve power. If you solve power in Nigeria, that's it. And Nigeria doesn't even have a generation problem. They have a transmission problem. They should put all their effort into ensuring that we have the transmission lines for the next 3-4 decades. Solve power, you solve everything in Nigeria. Let me give you an example. 50% of everything produced in Nigeria perishes because we don't have an angle to process. And people who have the passion to process, they have to pay for diesel. Solve power, you solve Nigeria.
So in summary, because we've got a teeming population, especially piggybacking off what the last caller just mentioned now, the youthful population who, in sense, are not really lazy as was said in the past. If there are three sectors you can pick up to say get people to work and this economy productive, what would the sectors be?
Okay, so I also have my views on the youth. I think Nigeria needs about 8, 9, 10,000 vocational schools. Skill people up, they will appreciate it on the one hand, and then push them out. But agriculture obviously is one. But if you do power and you do agriculture, then you've got processing. You just got the people. You've got people to work in all these sectors. It's a no-brainer. To be honest, if you can solve power, if that's the passion of our president, if you can solve power in Nigeria, you solve all. Because once you take care of one, you start taking care of the others. I think you'll get people into construction, you'll get them into services, into welding. Welding, I mean, it sounds very strange, but welding is a major feature when you come to the upstream industry. We need to bring like 2,000 welders to the fore every year, and we don't even have a welding school. People do welding by apprenticeship, and if you go to a place like the United States, they have the American Welding Institute where you have to go to for over a year. They teach you how to weld, and then you get a certificate, and that certificate earns you a lot of money. But that's just an example.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Deji West, for being on the show this morning. It's been a very enlightening conversation. Dr. Deji West, he's the managing partner of Westons and also the chairman of Plateau Med. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Plateau Med.
Plateau Med. Okay, so Plateau Med is an organization that deals with healthcare and tech as well.
No, so Plateau Med is an organization that builds tech solutions
Okay.
for stakeholders in the healthcare industry.
Awesome.
So